H&S for new to the role administrators. 1. Introduction, Learning Goals, Success Criteria. Welcome to SBCI's New to the Role Administrator e-module. As a principal or vice principal, you are considered a supervisor under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Supervisors are subject to legislated duties, which we are going to explore. This e-module was built not to be overly legalistic, but rather to equip you with relevant knowledge of the Occupational Health and Safety Act and its practical application in a school setting. A workbook with optional exercises is available for this e-module. Learning goals. After this e-module, you should be able to 1. Understand your legislated role as a supervisor within the context of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. 2. Create a safe work environment in your school. 3. Respond to and manage various health and safety situations in your school. Success criteria. After this e-module, I am able to 1. Find and utilize legal information. 2. Know how to create a safe environment. 3. Respond to a wide variety of safety circumstances. 2. A word on acronyms. Every profession has its acronyms, and health and safety is no exception. The following acronyms are used throughout this e-module. H&S, Health and Safety. IRS, Internal Responsibility System. JHSC, Joint Health and Safety Committee. MLTSD, Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development. OHSA, Occupational Health and Safety Act. PPE, Personal Protective Equipment. TOR, Terms of Reference. Please note the narrator refers to the OHSA as the Act. 3. Table of Contents. In this e-module, we will cover Overview of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, Definition of a worker, Worker rights, Worker duties, JHSC, the MLTSD, your roles and responsibilities as a supervisor, situations that may arise at your school, and how to manage them. 4. Overview of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, OHSA. 4.1. Intro, Internal Responsibility System, IRS. The Occupational Health and Safety Act, OHSA, provides the legal framework that legislates the rights and duties of all parties in the workplace, the procedures for dealing with workplace hazards, and enforcement. The OHSA makes it clear that the employer has the greatest responsibility for H&S in the workplace. That said, the OHSA places responsibilities on all workplace parties, such as workers and supervisors. Everyone has a legislated role to play to ensure the requirements of the OHSA are met in the workplace. These shared responsibilities form the basis for the Internal Responsibility System, IRS. Your workbook contains further reading on the IRS. 4.2. Roles and Responsibilities. All persons play an important role in keeping their workplace safe. 4.2.1. The employer. The employer, typically represented by the senior team at your school board, as stated earlier, has the greatest responsibility with respect to H&S in the workplace. The employer is responsible for ensuring that the IRS is established, promoted, and functioning successfully. 4.2.2. The supervisor. As a supervisor, your H&S obligations for workers are best understood in the context of 1. The definition of worker. 2. Worker rights. 3. Worker duties, and just to make it even more complex, 4. workers who are a member of a joint health and safety committee. Each will be explored individually in the next sections. 5. Definition of worker. The long-standing definition of worker under the OHSA has been a person who performs work or supplies services for monetary compensation. In the context of school boards, this would include teachers, educational assistants, custodians, maintenance staff, administrators, and any others on the payroll. In 2014, this definition was expanded to include other individuals who don't receive monetary compensation, including 1. High school students volunteering as part of a work experience program, and 2. Persons performing work as part of an approved post-secondary program. These amendments mean that 1. Students placed in co-op and other programs, such as OYAP into workplaces, are considered workers under the OHSA. 2. Post-secondary students placed in our schools, such as a student teacher, are also considered workers under the OHSA. 6. Worker rights. The OHSA embraces 3 fundamental worker rights: the right to 1. Participate, 2. No, and 3. Refuse. 1. The right to participate. The worker's right to participate means that they are directly involved in the process of identifying and resolving H&S concerns. For example, a worker can participate as a member of a JHSC. The JHSC has the power to identify situations that may be a potential source of danger or a hazard to workers, and make recommendations to the employer for the improvement of the H&S of workers. More on JHSCs in an upcoming section. 2. The right to know. Workers have the right to know about H&S issues and hazards in the workplace. As we will learn shortly, the worker's right to know is tied in part to your duties as a supervisor. We will review your duties in detail in just a moment. Tip: a practical strategy as a supervisor with legal duties to provide workers with H&S hazard information is to have H&S as a standard agenda item during staff meetings. 3. The right to refuse. The worker's right to refuse unsafe work is set out under Part 5 of the OHSA. The OHSA states that a worker may refuse to work where they have reason to believe that something in the workplace poses a danger to themselves or others, or is in contravention with the OHSA or the regulations. So, for example, your school is undergoing renovations, which involves various construction activities. A teacher believes that airborne contaminants from the construction are entering their classroom and adversely affecting their health. The teacher can exercise their right to refuse. The right to refuse applies to all workers covered by the OHSA, but there are exceptions. Certain workers that have a responsibility to protect public safety cannot refuse unsafe work if the refusal would endanger the H&S of another person. Teachers have a limited right to refuse. They may not exercise the right to refuse if the life, health, or safety of a student is placed in imminent jeopardy. So, using the previous example, the teacher cannot refuse to work while leaving their students in an unsafe situation, such as being left unsupervised. Should you experience a work refusal to your school, the OHSA has a prescribed process that must be followed. Simplified, this process is as follows. 1. Firstly, the worker must report the situation promptly to their supervisor, you, and remain close to their area of work. 2. Next, the supervisor must investigate the concern in the presence of the refusing worker and the worker JHSC member. 3. Third, If the investigation does not result in the worker being satisfied with the outcome, the next step is to call the MLTSD. This is known as a Stage 2 work refusal. As stated, this is the simplified process. Your school board's JHSC TOR and/or work refusal procedure may add additional steps, details to the process. Additional factors, such as whether another worker is assigned the responsibilities of the refusing worker, also needs to be taken into consideration. If you are thinking this is a complex process, you are correct. You should know and periodically review your school board's work refusal procedure. Additionally, SBCI has a one-page work refusal tip sheet that you may want to have readily at hand. Most importantly, remember you are not alone. Your board's H&S lead should be your new best friend during the work refusal process. 7. Worker duties. The OHSA prescribes various worker duties. They are detailed in Section 28. 3 of these duties include state a worker shall, 28.1, A, work in compliance with the provisions of this OHSA and the regulations. B, use or wear the equipment, protective devices, or clothing that the worker's employer requires to be used or worn. C, report to his or her employer or supervisor the absence of or defect in any equipment or protective device of which the worker is aware, and which may endanger himself, herself, or another worker. One of the takeaways of these duties is that, as a supervisor, these are not the nice-to-dos, but the have-to-dos. For example, if an employer prescribes a particular piece of personal protective equipment, PPE, it must be worn. Next, we explore the function of the JHSC, including worker members of the JHSC. 8. The Joint Health and Safety Committee. The OHSA makes it clear that safety is a shared responsibility that involves all workplace parties. Key to this shared participatory concept is the Joint Health and Safety Committee, JHSC. A JHSC is composed of worker and employer members, mutually committed to improving H&S in the workplace. The Ontario Ministry of Labour Training and Skills Development, MLTSD, describes the JHSC's role as an advisory body that helps to stimulate or raise awareness of H&S issues in the workplace, recognizes and identifies workplace risks, and develops recommendations for the employer to address these risks. To achieve its goal, the committee holds regular meetings and conducts regular workplace inspections, and makes written recommendations to the employer for the improvement of the H&S of workers. The roles and responsibilities of the JHSC are detailed in Section 9 of the OHSA. Before we review these responsibilities, we need to pause and discuss 2 key aspects of JHSC duties within school boards. 1. Site-based versus multi-site JHSC. And 2. JHSC Terms of Reference, TOR. 1. What's the difference between a site-based and multi-site Joint Health and Safety Committee? A multi-site JHSC, also known as a multi-workplace JHSC, is a single JHSC established and maintained for more than one workplace, such as an entire school board. With multi-sites, some of the functions of the JHSC occur at the board level. For example, the selection of JHSC members and JHSC meetings. A site-based JHSC is a committee established for a single workplace, such as a school. With site-based committees, most of the JHSC functions occur at the school or other workplace level, such as JHSC meetings. While both types of committees have the same functions and powers legislated under the OHSA, your role as a supervisor will vary operationally. 2. Terms of Reference, TOR. These operational differences will be detailed in your school board's JHSC Terms of Reference, also known as TOR. Note, some school boards refer to this document as JHSC Structure and Function Guidance or JHSC Operating Procedure. The OHSA does not spell out detailed procedures about how a JHSC operates, but rather just sets out key requirements to be met. Terms of reference detail the purpose and structure of a committee. They state what needs to be done, by whom, and when. They are your roadmap, regardless of whether your school board is established as a multi-site or site-based. 8.1. What are the functions of a Joint Health and Safety Committee? The committee has various powers, which we will detail as 1. Principal functions, and 2. Need to know. 1. Principal functions. First, to carry out its functions, the JHSC is required to hold meetings at least once every 3 months. The mechanics of these meetings are contained within your TOR. Second, the JHSC is legislated to inspect the workplace, school, on a regular basis. More information and guidance on how to perform these inspections can be found in the SBCI Inspections e-module, available for elementary and secondary schools. Let's pause for a minute. While your JHSC has multiple functions and powers, compliance with meeting and inspection schedules is critical. When you are visited by a MLTSD inspector, more on this later, you can pretty much be assured the inspector will ask to see evidence that meetings and inspections are occurring at legislated frequency, or the inspector may look for evidence of meetings, inspections on your H&S bulletin board. In addition to legal compliance, regular meetings and inspections demonstrate your due diligence as a supervisor. Back to JHSC functions. Third are a number of intersecting functions, including identifying actual and potential hazards in the workplace, obtaining information from the employer relating to H&S in the workplace, and recommending H&S improvements in the workplace. Again, the mechanics of these functions depend on the language of your TOR and whether your school board is site-based or multi-site. But regardless of your JHSC type, as a supervisor, you should have H&S as a standing staff meeting agenda item. More on this when we discuss due diligence. 2. Here are some additional need-to-know JHSC functions the OHSA requires. At least 2 members of the JHSC, one representing workers and one who exercises managerial functions, to take specialized training called certification. Being consulted about and having a worker present at the beginning of H&S testing in the workplace. Investigating when a worker is killed or critically injured. Being present at work refusal investigations. Providing a committee member representing workers an opportunity to accompany a MLTSD inspector on the physical inspection of the workplace. Please remember, these are highlights and not an all-inclusive list. And finally, it is an offense for any person, including an employer, to knowingly hinder or interfere with or to give false information to the JHSC or to a committee member who is in the process of performing their duties under the OHSA. 9. The Ministry of Labor Training and Skills Development. MLTSD inspectors enforce the OHSA and its regulations. They have many legal powers to support their enforcement role. These powers are itemized in Section 54 of the OHSA and are too lengthy to list, except for 54(1)(a) states, an inspector may enter any workplace without a warrant or notice for an inspection. As a school administrator, this is an important section of the OHSA to remember. So why would a MLTSD inspector visit your school? Generally, for a proactive visit or reactive visit. Proactive visits. One of the most common proactive visits experienced by school boards has been the result of MLTSD H&S inspection initiatives, also called blitzes. During an inspection, the inspector will focus on initiative-related issues, as well as general compliance with the OHSA. Former provincial blitzes that involved school boards have included slips, trips, and falls, workplace violence. Reactive visits. Reactive visits can be in response to a critical injury, work refusal, complaint, occupational illness. Let's review one of these. Critical injuries. Critical injuries. If someone is critically injured at the workplace, a number of legislated tasks must occur, including MLTSD notification. But first, what is a critical injury? Ontario Regulation 420/21 states, an injury is critical if it is an injury of a serious nature that A. places life in jeopardy, B. produces unconsciousness, C. results in substantial loss of blood, D. involves the fracture of a leg or arm but not a finger or toe, E. involves the amputation of a leg, arm, hand, or foot but not a finger or toe, F. consists of burns to a major portion of the body, or G. causes the loss of sight in an eye. Please note that the MLTSD considers the leg to include an ankle or foot and the arm to include a wrist or hand, and although the regulation specifies that the fracture or amputation of a single finger or toe is not considered to be a critical injury, a fracture or amputation of more than one finger or toe is considered to be a critical injury. To complicate things a little further, critical injuries must be reported to the MLTSD for non-workers, such as students, parents, and visitors in your school. Not all non-worker critical injuries require reporting. Reporting is only required if you answer yes to both of these questions. 1. Did the critical injury occur where a worker was working or might reasonably be expected to work? 2. Is there a reasonable connection between the hazard that caused the incident and a realistic risk to the worker or workers' H&S? Pop quiz. So would you report the following? 1. A parent entering your school slips on an icy school step and breaks a leg. Yes or no? Yes, this would be reportable, as the answer would be yes to both of the prior questions. 2. A student falls off the monkey bars during recess and breaks an arm. Yes or no? No, this would not be reportable. While a staff member may be supervising in and around a playground area, there is no reasonable nexus between the hazard and realistic worker risk. As a school administrator in the context of the OHSA, if someone is critically injured, 1. Always call 911 in an emergency. 2. Notify the MLTSD and JHSC immediately. 3. Do not disturb the scene. 4. Provide a written report within 48 hours. Operationally, this may vary between school boards. For example, your role may be to notify a central contact, such as your health and safety lead, who will put into action further notifications and reports. Additionally, Your school board protocol may require you to also notify your superintendent. MLTSD compliance orders. One of the many MLTSD inspector powers under the OHSA is the ability to issue compliance orders, and an inspector may utilize this power after a school visit. Orders are issued where there is a contravention of the OHSA or its regulations. Orders will be in writing and expected to be complied with within a certain time period, or, in some cases, immediately. If a workplace does not follow an inspector's orders, charges may be laid. After the visit. Regardless of the reason for the visit, the MLTSD inspector will leave a completed field visit report form that summarizes their findings. If orders have been issued, a notice of compliance form will also be left. These are important pieces of paper, particularly if orders are issued. Please ensure 1. A copy of the visit report is posted on your H&S bulletin board. 2. The original form or forms are provided to your H&S lead. 7. The supervisor roles and responsibilities. Throughout this e-module, we've tried to be as non-legalistic as possible, but here we need to review the Teacher's Regulation, Section 27 of the OHSA, and finally, due diligence and its practical applications in your school. 8.1 Teacher's Regulation 857. When the OHSA came into law in 1979, teachers were not covered. This changed in 1984 with Regulation 857. In addition to including teachers under the provisions of the OHSA, Regulation 857 has some specific restrictions on the right to refuse unsafe work and language respecting JHSCs. But most importantly, for this section, Regulation 857 deems principals and vice principals to be a supervisor under the OHSA. What does this mean? It means that Section 27 of the OHSA applies to principals and vice principals, which means a lot. 8.2 Duties of Supervisors. The 5 duties of supervisors are detailed in the OHSA Section 27. Many of the duties are similar to that of an employer. For those that enjoy reading legislation, the exact wording of these duties can be found in your workbook, but in normal language, these duties are telling workers about hazards and dangers and responding to their concerns, making sure workers wear and use the right protective equipment, doing everything reasonable in the circumstances to protect workers from being hurt or getting a work-related illness. Here are some examples of a school administrator fulfilling their duties as a supervisor. 1. Know the hazards and dangers in your school. For example, provincially, slips, trips, and falls represent approximately 30% of all school board incidents and injuries. 2. Implement corrective measures for these hazards and dangers. For example, the provision of 2-step safety ladders when staff are working on bulletin boards, etc. 3. Demonstrate your commitment to safety by keeping your H&S bulletin board current. 4. Participate in workplace inspections. 5. Encourage staff to report their H&S concerns to you. 6. Conduct effective incident investigations. 8.3 Due diligence. In the event of an incident, the proof that you upheld your duties is commonly referred to as due diligence. Due diligence is a legal concept that is not defined in legislation. In the context of H&S liability, due diligence is understood as actions and behaviors that are measurable, observable, and documented, which prove all reasonable precautions were taken by a supervisor or employer in the event of an incident or violation of the OHSA or regulations. This means that you, as a school administrator, play an active role in identifying workplace hazards and communicating, implementing preventative measures according to the OHSA and your school board's H&S policy and program. Here are 6 ways to demonstrate due diligence as a school administrator. 1. Have H&S as a standard agenda item at your staff meetings. 2. Keep your H&S bulletin board current. 3. Be mindful of compliance activities such as workplace inspections and associated deadlines. 4. Promptly investigate incidents with a focus on preventing recurrence. 5. Develop and maintain a school emergency plan. 6. Document and record. Remember, if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. Documentation may provide the evidence necessary for legal proceedings in the event of a serious incident. Poor documentation can negatively impact your and your employer's due diligence defense. Demonstrating due diligence requires that you are able to show proof that you have completed these and other practices. 8. Situations that may arise at your school and how to manage them. 9.1 MLTSD Visit. In Section 2, we learned about the MLTSD and their role in enforcing the OHSA. As a school administrator, you may be faced with a MLTSD inspector visiting your school. MLTSD field visits generally fall under 3 categories. 1. Inspections. Proactive field visits, such as targeted enforcement strategies or blitzes. 2. Investigations. Reactive field visits in response to an event, such as a critical injury. 3. Consultations. Typically a field visit initiated by the MLTSD or at the request of workplace parties. Consultations normally don't occur at schools. Common to all types of field visits is generally the MLTSD provides no notice prior to their visit. Let's test your knowledge with the following scenario. A MLTSD inspector arrives at your school unannounced. You are extra busy today as your VP is at an in-service at your education center. You really don't have time for this interruption of your day. Do you 1. Tell them that you are too busy today and please set up an appointment to return another day? Do you remember when we discussed the powers of a MLTSD inspector? Under Section 54 of the OHSA, inspectors are given broad powers, including entering any workplace, such as a school, without prior notice. So this is not a good strategy. 2. Tell them to take a seat and that you will attempt to contact the board's H&S lead to attend the school and help the inspector. This is not a bad strategy, and if your school board has a MLTSD visit procedure, your procedure may suggest this approach. It may aggravate the visit, as the inspector has no obligation to wait for your board's H&S lead, so you may have to begin the visit with your H&S lead en route. 3. Welcome the inspector with open arms and offer, without the inspector even asking, to tour the entire school room by room. This strategy is not advised. Be polite and professional while keeping your helpfulness in check. Remain focused on the purpose of the visit. 4. In a polite, professional manner, ask the inspector as to the purpose of their visit. Accompany the inspector during their time in your school, ensuring the visit remained focused on the purpose originally stated by the inspector. This is the best approach. Ensure you notify your school board's H&S lead when the inspector arrives. SBCI has a 1-page MLTSD visit tip sheet that you may find useful. 9.2 Work Refusal. On Monday morning, one of your teachers tells you that they heard that there was an asbestos remediation project at the school on the weekend, and they don't feel safe working anywhere in the school. They are going home until you sort it out. Do you 1. Tell them to have a nice day at home and then add, without pay, and then you proceed to call in a supply teacher. Arguably, this might have felt like the best answer in the moment, but remember our discussion in Section 2. The right to refuse is an integral right under the OHSA. A work refusal requires that a prescribed legislated process be followed. If you have not experienced many or any work refusals, it's time to call in help from your board's H&S lead. 2. Tell them to go sit in their car while you ask some questions. You ask another teacher on their prep to cover their class. Again, the work refusal process is prescribed under the OHSA. The investigation must take place in the presence of the refusing worker and a worker member of the JHSC. Refused work may be offered to another worker only if the new worker is informed that the work is the subject of a work refusal, and this must be done in the presence of a worker member of the JHSC. 3. You decide to fast-track this work refusal by immediately calling the MLTSD, telling them that you have a work refusal, and require them to attend and resolve. A for initiative, but sorry, there is that prescribed process. The MLTSD work refusal process has 2 stages. To recap, 1. Worker considers the work unsafe. 2. Worker reports refusal to their supervisor. 3. Supervisor investigates in the presence of the worker and the worker member of the JHSC. 4. Either issue is resolved or not resolved. This is considered Stage 1. The MLTSD will not attend a work refusal until the Stage 1 investigation is complete and the issue is not resolved. 4. You prepare for a work refusal by reviewing your board's work refusal procedure, protocol, or perhaps the SBCI work refusal tip sheet. If confronted with a work refusal, first ensure none of your staff or students are exposed to imminent jeopardy, and then call your board's H&S lead. You got it. Don't forget to document. 9.3 Health and Safety Concern. It's Monday morning, and it's going to be a busy week. One of your teachers has left you a note that they have a H&S concern that they would like to discuss with you, and can they drop by your office at lunch? Should you 1. Tell them you are really busy and that they should discuss the matter with their JHSC rep. The OHSA is very clear re the worker's duty to report. Workers have a duty under the OHSA to report a safety problem to their supervisor or employer. The JHSC may become involved, but that's not the first step. 2. You consider this staff member as becoming high maintenance. Perhaps it's time for them to transfer to a different school. The OHSA prohibits workers from being penalized in reprisal for obeying the law or exercising their rights. The word reprisal is a legal term that refers to a negative action or threat by a supervisor, employer, which occurs because a worker followed the OHSA or tried to enforce the OHSA. 3. Tell them you are super busy, but will try to meet with them Friday. The consequences of delay may result in the worker involving the JHSC, union, MLTSD, before you've had the chance to resolve the situation. The sooner you deal with your staff's H&S concern, the better the likelihood of a successful outcome. 4. Handle H&S concerns as they arise, and don't forget to document. You've got it. 10. Summary. That was a lot of material, but if we summarized everything down to 4 takeaways, they would be: 1. Place H&S as a standing item on your staff meeting agenda. 2. Place emphasis on H&S compliance activities, such as your workplace inspection schedule. 3. Our legal colleagues would remind us that if it's not documented, it's not done. Demonstrating due diligence requires that you are able to show proof that you have completed the various due diligence practices. 4. You are not alone. If you are unsure, don't know how to proceed, or if you require clarification, reach out. 11. Acknowledgements. SBCI would like to thank Mark Joel, retired Superintendent of Education Operations, for his mentorship, review, and contributions to this e-module and workbook. In addition, we thank the following for their review, thoughts, comments, and contributions. Chris Macone, Health and Safety Specialist with Huron-Perth Catholic District School Board. Clint Vester, Supervisor, Occupational Health and Safety with Ottawa-Carleton District School Board. Jean-Louis Lepage, Coordonnateur des services d'entretien, Conseil scolaire de District catholique des Aurores boréales. Nancy Cullum, Manager of Health and Safety with Upper Grand District School Board. Serge Gauthier, Manager, Health and Safety and Maintenance Standards with Conseil scolaire Viamonde. Tim Lauzon, Health and Safety Officer with Greater Essex County District School Board.